Welcome to today's webinar called Speaking Out, the Secret to Business and Leadership Success. I'm George Diaz. I'll be your facilitator today. Our presenter is Ann B. Friedman, founder and CEO of Speak Out, Inc. She works with executives, business owners, and community leaders who want to create and deliver outstanding speeches and presentations. Ann is a former journalist and a graduate of the University of Florida. And now, here's Ann.
Thank you, George. It's so great to have all of you on the call today. I'm really excited and glad you're here. Now, before we get started, I have a few little housekeeping things I've learned from the social media world. If you like what you're about to hear or hear during the evening, I want to ask you please to make sure that you tweet about it in Miami. If you care to, please like us at Speak Out Inc. I invite you, if we're not already connected, to connect on LinkedIn. And if you haven't visited our website, please do. I have some questions for you to be thinking about as we get started tonight. Are you tired of being an undiscovered rock star? That is, are you sometimes a hidden gem in your company, in your organization, in the community that you serve? Do you feel as though opportunities are passing you by because you're not as comfortable as you'd like to be when you're speaking to a group or even when you're out networking? Do you sometimes feel that things happen to other people and they ought to be happening to you? And do you sometimes find yourself being talked over? You know you have something really valuable to contribute, and someone with a louder mouth, not as good an idea as you have, gets the credit, gets heard? And what would it mean to you if you were more highly regarded as the expert that you know you are? After all, your mom always thought you were a rock star, didn't she? And if she didn't, don't worry, I do. And I'm sure that you're going to be even a more visible, outstanding, and confident leader and successful in your business by the time we finish tonight than you were before. I'm here to help you, and you're at the right place at the right time. A little bit about me. I used to be a newspaper reporter, as George said, but I didn't start out that way. I was a shy, perfectly pear-shaped teenager, but I was very curious. So I wound up studying journalism, and I became a journalist, and I got paid to ask people questions, and I loved it. As a freelance writer after college, I had to pay my rent. So when people asked me if I would write speeches, I said, no problem. I'll figure it out on the go, as many of you probably have when you have something new to do. I wrote the speeches, I handed them over, I got paid, no problem, until I was asked to hear them speak. And then it was a disaster. More than half of the time I would go hear somebody speak and they were awful. And I said, oh my God, is it my speech or is it the speaker? So I began to insist that they let me hear them say it. And then I began to do training. I was asked to be a speaker myself, which I really hated at first. I got better and better, started the company, and the rest is history, as they say. And my goal for you tonight is that you gain the confidence and the expertise to help you launch yourself into an even more successful role than you have right now. So what are we going to do together tonight? We're going to first take a look at some of those fantastic opportunities that are out there for you when you have more comfort, when you have more expertise as a speaker. We're going to look at why it's important to have presence, why you need to look good in front of a group. But my feeling is if you have no content, what's the purpose? So content remains king or queen, and we're going to talk about how do you get that content together and what does it mean. I'm going to give you some very practical techniques to open your presentation so you get their attention right away from the beginning. And we're going to talk about some next steps that you can take to become the kind of leader, the kind of business leader, the kind of community leader that you really want to be. And if you're already a leader, my goal is to help you go up to the next level. Juan Diego Calle came to me about 3 years ago. He was giving his first ever speech in Cartagena, Colombia, His audience was going to be 1,200 of the most influential internet leaders in the world. Can you imagine? And he had never given a speech before. He was being asked to talk because his disruptive company, Internet.co, was introducing a new domain extension to compete with .com. He had 7 minutes to give that presentation. We worked for 6 weeks to get him ready. We borrowed a University of Miami conference room. We tried everything we could, and he did that presentation. He got a standing ovation. I got to see it live streamed from Colombia. I felt like a proud mama. Well, fast forward to just a few months ago, Juan Diego Calle sold his company for more than $100 million to Neustar. Now, I'm not saying you're going to wind up with exactly the same kind of success that Juan Diego did, but I can tell you when you put the energy and effort into creating a presentation, all kinds of magical things will happen to you. So where are some of the places you could speak? I like to call them your off-Broadway destinations. And many professional speakers, many business and community leaders start at their local Rotary clubs. Why? Because these Rotary clubs are filled with intelligent, hard-working business people who love to learn. And every week they have a different speaker. Why not you? It was one of the first places I spoke. It was one of the first places my husband spoke. And I have brought many of my clients over the years to Rotary meetings to get their start. But there's more. You can offer to give a class at a university or a college or even a high school and share your expertise. Same thing goes for career fairs. They're always looking for experts, and you have something to share, don't you? Community organizations are begging for people to step up and become leaders. Take a board position, volunteer your time, and soon you will be a leader. Now, what about sporting events? Why is that there? You can network at sporting events. You can meet all kinds of people that you wouldn't otherwise meet. You want to be prepared to talk about your company, your mission, your nonprofit, even in those environments. And the last and most obvious place is that you can be a speaker at meetings and conferences when you put together your message in the right way. So now we're going to do a poll, and I need to share with you, this is the first time, so we're going to see what happens. A poll is going to come up, George, if you would do that, please. And I'm asking you where you spoke first. And if you haven't had a speaking engagement, that's okay. Just answer the questions, please, and let's see what the results were. I remember my first speaking engagement after college. It was at Women in Communication. And I was in the middle of the afternoon in front of 100 journalists, and I was scared to death. And I will tell you more about that later. But it really, really unnerved me, but I prepared and I did it. So let's see where your first speaking engagement was. Do we have the results, George, yet? Okay. Are
Yeah,
they coming up?
they're showing now.
They're showing now. Okay. Can you read them, George, because I can't hear them.
Oh, okay. So right now it's 50%
50%
nonprofit associations and 50% have not booked one yet. The others have no votes.
Okay. So for many of you, like for many of us, the first speaking engagement is in front of a nonprofit, and that's fine. It's a good place to get out, and they need to hear your voice. Thank you. Okay. So let's say you haven't been invited to speak. They're not beating the door down. What can you do? You can create your own speakers bureau. And I have done this for several clients over the years. Even if you're a one-person company, you can say you have a speakers bureau and send out information about your topics. You'd be amazed who will contact you to have you speak. You can also reach out and offer yourself to organizations. And you can stage things in your office, in your home, and invite people to come hear your presentation. This is the way many people have gotten started, and it's something that you can do as well. Now, once you have the audience in front of you, what are some of the things you can do to build that relationship so you have a follow-up? You can ask them to tweet like I did. You can recognize important people that may be in the audience. You can make a special offer. I'm going to do that at the end of this webinar. I spoke last week in Indianapolis and in Orlando, and I collected business cards at the end of my presentation. So I had about 75 in one, 100 in the other. I offered door prizes, and that was a way that I could gather these names for leads to contact afterwards. You can also issue a challenge and ask people to respond to you. For example, if you're in healthcare and you offer a challenge for people to start an exercise program or lose weight, you can ask them to get in touch with you afterwards as a way of maintaining that relationship and beginning to build it. And you can present awards to people who participate in your presentation in some way. These are all ways you can build an engagement strategy for yourself and your clients. Another thing that really helps is to remember that once you create this message, it's not a one-time only application. You can take your content and you can turn it into a blog. You can create a newsletter with it. You can turn it into a video. There are all kinds of ways you can use the content that you develop to further your business, to further your career, to further your nonprofit. And it's wonderfully socially acceptable. It's recycling your expertise into wonderful ways that other people can take advantage of as well. What are some of these opportunities that we've talked about, additional things that can happen to you? Many of these have happened to me, and I know they're going to happen to you as well. You can be invited to introduce important dignitaries at a meeting. This gives you great visibility, and there are formulas for introducing speakers. You may be asked to present an award on behalf of your company or your nonprofit. You may accept an award for yourself or someone else. You can get invited on radio and television shows. You're going to land new business. You'll be selected for leadership positions, land new clients, and get invited to do keynote speaking. You see the picture of the Parthenon that's up there? I spoke several years ago at a conference in San Antonio, Texas. In the room was a woman from Greece who had a conference every year. After hearing me speak, she invited me, all expenses paid, to go to Greece to speak at her conference. You just never know what's going to happen. As I shared with you, it's magical, the kinds of things that can happen when you're a speaker, when you gain confidence to share your expertise with others. Now we have another poll, and I'm going to challenge you a little bit to think about how many speaking engagements, whether it's in your company, in your organization, in your nonprofit, or out in the community, do you think you could pursue in the next 90 days? So George, would you please put that poll up?
It's up. We have people up voting.
Okay, good. Okay. So why do I issue this challenge? Because it's like an exercise program. You can pay to belong to a gym, but what happens if you don't go? Nothing, right? So I'm encouraging you, the only way you really get better at speaking, better at leadership speaking, is by doing it. So I'm encouraging you to think about giving yourself a commitment to get out there and share what you know. Okay, do we have the results, George?
Yeah, between 0 and 2 we have 70%. Between 3 and 5 we have 20%. And between 6 and 6 or more, we have 10%.
All right, so some of you are braver than others, but the majority of you have committed to at least 0 to 2, and that's great. And for the rest of you, I'm going to encourage you to get out there and do it. You'll be amazed at what's going to happen when you get out there to speak. Thank you. Now, why do I say that content is queen? Some people say content is king. Because why do you want to listen to someone? You want to learn something, right? You want to learn something that can help you advance in your business or your career or help your nonprofit become more successful. And just looking at a pretty face, although it's wonderful, or a handsome face, doesn't really help us, does it? It makes us feel good for a few seconds. But when you're an expert, you have lots of really good stuff to share. Remember, you are the expert. You have spent time. You went to school, you've learned, you've practiced, and we want to hear what you have to say. But part of the challenge we have is there are so many different cultural groups, so many different folks out there, that part of the fear we sometimes feel is we're really not connecting. Here in South Florida, we have so many multicultural groups represented from so many different countries, and their experience may be different than your experience. So as you craft your message, as you put your content together, you want to be sensitive to the fact that people do not share the same background you do. Not everyone. So what can you include that's going to connect you to their different experiences that they bring to the table? And then we have the additional challenge of the digital divide, it's called. People under a certain age are called digital natives. That is, they've grown up with all the technology, and the rest of us are called digital immigrants because we're still figuring it out. When you put your presentation together, remember that a television show that's familiar to you may not be to someone else, just like using technology. So as you craft your content, you not only want to think about where are the people from that are coming, but how old are they? And how do you need to adapt your material to make sure that it's relevant to everyone in your audience? Now we have another poll coming up because one of the challenges for speakers is keeping each other's attention. Wouldn't you agree? Sometimes you're ready to look at your phone, you're going to the refrigerator right now. So, George, is this poll open now, please? Okay. The question is, how long do you think the attention span is of a goldfish? And let's see who guesses this correctly. Okay. And why is this important? Because sadly, attention span, as you may know, is shrinking terribly every year all across the planet. So let's see what you think a goldfish, how long you think a goldfish will pay attention. George, do you have the answer to that yet?
Yes, we do. It's we had 50.
George, I can't hear you do.
Yeah, we had 50% said 3 seconds, 20% said 5 seconds,
50% said 3 seconds.
10% said 7, and 20% said 9 seconds.
Well, those of you who said 9 seconds are right, according to research. And that's pretty sobering, isn't it? Because the research that's out there now says that it used to be attention span was 7 to 8 minutes, the time between commercials on television, then it shrank to 3 to 4 minutes. Now, everybody go like this, it's 3 to 4 seconds, the average attention span. So we have less attention span than a goldfish, and that's part of what we're competing with as speakers. Thank you, George. So part of the question is, how do we capture each other's attention? How do we really get people to listen to us? Alan Monroe was an industrial psychologist in the last century, and he said there were 4 questions going on in our audience's mind as we try to communicate. Now, this is in a small group setting, this is one-on-one, this is in a large group. As I do these questions, I encourage you to say them aloud, or at least think them aloud. So the first question Alan Monroe said we're thinking is, why should I listen to you anyway? Why should I listen to you? And you need to be able to answer that with your content. What's in it for me to listen to you? What's in it for me? And then the sister question to that is, well, what's in it for you if I listen to you? And the last question Alan Monroe asked, there's a modern day variation of it. If you have a teenager, know a teenager, or used to be a teenager, 3 words that teenagers say with great frequency. My daughter is not a teenager, but she still does this. Not a teenager anymore. The 3 words are mom, nobody cares. Alan Monroe said this more than 100 years ago. He said, who cares? So your message needs to answer all of those questions, and when you do, we are more likely to stay engaged with you and do what you're asking. Now, part of that conversation has to do with what are called benefit words. Benefit words are those things that make us sit up and say, oh, this is going to be good. I can't wait to hear more. And here are some examples of benefit words, and I invite you to grab some of these words and use them in your presentation. You want to use them in a generous way because these are the words we're listening for. You're going to solve a problem. You're going to save me money. You're going to make my environment safer. You're going to give me satisfaction. You're going to help me have better health. If you're not doing something for me, I'm probably not going to listen. And then the flip side of that is we buy something usually because there's a problem. I'm not talking about shopping therapy where we go to get a new outfit, although that usually is solving some kind of problem because we're temporarily depressed. But I'm talking about, are you frustrated with the way that you come across in an audience? Are you angry that other people are getting attention when you came up with the idea in the first place? Are you discouraged by the fact that you keep getting passed over for leadership opportunities? You want to weave these kinds of words into your presentation and then come up with a solution. And then we're really likely to pay attention to your message all the way through. Now, I mentioned the sitting still quotient. Sadly, across the planet, it's shrinking. And so one of the key ways that we get and keep each other's attention is by using very strong opening strategies. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. Now, in any given speech, there are 4 basic parts of a presentation. And I wish I had tonight time to go through all of these. At the end of the message, I'm going to be talking with you about how I'll be able to give you some more support after this webinar. But the reality is any presentation, no matter how long it is, you have an opening where you bring us into the message, and we're going to be trying out some of those tonight. You have a pre-body, which is a mini sexy overview of what's to come. You have the body. There are 5 ways you can structure your ideas, and you have the close. Many people don't even think about how they're going to end. It's really important that you plan the ending at the beginning before you get too far. So let's look at these 2 opening techniques and see how you can use them. One of my favorites, and perhaps one of yours too, is to open with a story. Now, I did that. I talked to you about Juan Diego. When I was a Cub newspaper reporter in what feels as though it was another life, I had an editor who actually wore those shades you may have seen in the movies, and he smoked a big fat cigar you could smoke in the newsroom in those days. And I went very proudly one day and turned in a story I had been working on for a couple of hours. I put it on his desk, and the next thing I knew, he was taking a red grease pencil, and he was going like this, and he ripped the first page in half, and he threw it on the ground, and the tears were welling up, and he said, "Miss Friedman, you have buried the lead." That's the beginning, the top of the story, all the way down here. The moral of this story is if you're going to tell a story, make sure you practice it ahead of time, get to the juiciest, sexiest parts. But we love stories, and they're a very powerful way to open a presentation. You don't have to tell me you're going to tell me a story. Just dive into the message. And a recommendation is that you create a story bank for yourself. Get other people in your organization to share their success stories or horror stories or client stories. Gather videos, and then you can use these to put your message together. Another wonderful technique is called the promise to give us something technique. And this is designed to get people to stay with you all the way through the presentation. You don't have to say promise, and you don't have to say by the end, but the idea is that you're going to give them something of value. Let me give you 2 examples here. By the time we finish our presentation, you're going to be on your way to a personal portfolio worth millions of dollars. I don't know about you, but I might hang in for that presentation. And here's another example. By the end of my talk, you're going to know 3 ways to lose weight without really trying. Now, I would say to listen to that. You might not, but you might want to gather the information and share it with a friend, right, or a family member. Why do these techniques work? They work because you're setting the stage to give me greater stuff further on. Now, there are 2 ways I do not recommend you open. People of a particular gender will try to be neutral here, tend to feel as though they're missing an important anatomical part if they don't start with a joke. You know who you are. Why do I not recommend jokes? Because you never know if you're going to offend someone. Everybody's prickly today. There's all kinds of sexual harassment stuff out there. So it's a good idea to avoid opening with a joke. But Anne, I have to tell this joke. If you feel compelled to tell a joke, do it in the middle of the speech. By then they already know you're reasonably intelligent, you're confident, and if you want to tell the joke, then go ahead. The other way I do not recommend opening is apologizing. People of the other gender tend to apologize. Oh, the air conditioning's too hot, it's too cold, I'm late, I'm sorry. Don't waste our time doing that. What you do want to do is, if you feel compelled to apologize, one sentence and get it over with. Now, in an opening, please remember these parts. You want to thank the person who introduced you. You may recall I thanked George earlier on. You want a greeting. Does not have to be ladies and gentlemen. Can be hello everybody. Could be good morning, good afternoon, but you want a greeting. And then there's something I call the optional gracious throwaway line. It goes something like, go Gators, or how about those Canes, or or weren't those the best croissants you've ever had? It's some kind of line that appears to be gracious that connects you to the audience. Its purpose is to give your audience a little more time to quiet down, so when you finally do that opening, they're right with you. They're not distracted. So I'm going to ask a question now, a poll. What parts of the webinar have you found useful so far? And I have some of my best tips coming up at the end, so I'm encouraging you to stay in. We have 3 really good tips at the end.
Okay, the poll's running now.
The poll is running now. Let's see what they do. Thank you for participating in the polls. It's the first time I'm doing this, so let's see. Okay, they're running. I'm really curious to see what you found useful so far. Got the results, George?
Almost. There are people
Almost.
still.
There's stuff coming. Okay.
Okay, I'm going to close it up, and we are now sharing the results. So we've got 9% seeking new opportunities, 64% how to engage your audience during your talk, 18% attention span data, 64% again for techniques to open your message, and 36% to what not to do when you open.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that. And when you're presenting live, I encourage you to ask your audience questions and engage them in the presentation with you. I'm simulating this in the live webinar, but when you're live, it's really important that you focus on connecting to your audience in as active a way as you can. It may be a little intimidating at first, but try it. You'll be amazed at the information that you get. Now, I talked to you earlier that I was going to give you some information on how I could support you further, and I'm going to share with you, I am starting on October 1st an online speaking studio. I do have a few more tips at the end, so I encourage you just take a few minutes to introduce this course that we're going to be offering. It has 8 one-hour sessions starting on Wednesday nights, and I'll be recording it. The first session will deal with how you set your goals for yourself as a speaker, how to give the audience what you want, what they want, and get what you want too. We're going to look at strategies for really clever ways of brainstorming and getting the stuff out of your head into a way that people will really want to hear it. Part 3 is really cool. You're going to get a 20-page personalized communication style analysis all about you, and we're going to talk about you and your leadership style. Part 4 is going to be ways to organize all that content. As I shared, there are 5 ways to do that. Part 5 is another leadership session. You're going to get a 20-page personalized report on your motivators, what your passions are, and why that's important is the audience doesn't really care necessarily about what you care about, but if you understand it better and understand what they care about, you can connect in a more meaningful way. Part 6 is working on the mini commercial for your presentation, the pre-body, probably the toughest part to write. Part 7, I'm going to give you all 6 openings to help you get that message going. And by the way, you use those openings in the body of your presentation to open up each point. So they have a lot of applications. And then the last part is working on your close. How are you ending the presentation? The studio includes not only the 8 one-hour sessions with live Q&A at the end, and they're recorded. You're going to get a copy, a PDF version, a 240-page color cartoon workbook that takes you through the entire process of creating a presentation. And we have some more bonuses. You're going to get a private strategy session with me and the 2 reports that I mentioned to you before. And in addition to that, you'll have discounts on future coaching. This tonight and then through the 22nd, we have a special offer. It's just $6.95 for the course. And because you're on the call tonight, we're offering a 2-for-1. If 2 people from one company sign up, the second person is free. What a deal, right? And I would love to have you join us in this online speaking studio. Now, the last 3 tips I promised you are really important to your success as a leader, whether you're in a nonprofit or whether you're in a business organization. I strongly recommend you develop what I call pre-speaking rituals. Now, some people, and I try to do this, get a massage. Some people go for a run. They take a yoga class. They meditate. They watch a funny movie. Some people engage in adult entertainment, like a glass of wine or a beer or things you do behind closed doors. Whatever it takes for you to relax and be yourself, laugh a lot before you get on. You want to take some of the stress away. I wear what I call my prosperity panties. In Ecuador on New Year's Eve, the people there give each other gold underwear. They call it the color of gold. You should have a prosperous year. I had a really good friend from Ecuador, and the families always exchange underwear. She moved away, but every year I buy a new pair of gold or silver underwear, and so I wear it for important occasions. Make your own version of that. I also strongly recommend that you practice out loud. It does no good just to read your presentation over a few times. At the conference last week, one of the speakers said that she just thinks her presentation through over and over, and then she gets up to do it. Well, it's good to think about what you're going to do, but this is not a paper. This is you connecting with an audience, and I strongly encourage you to practice out loud at least 9 times for every presentation that you're going to do. If you can practice in front of someone, if you can videotape yourself in front of a live mirror, all of that's going to make you much better. And how do you practice? This is the last really good tip that I want to share with you. Please do not practice it all the way through. Why? You're going to be bored with it before it's over. You're going to start getting sing-song. I do recommend that you take your presentation apart and practice it in pieces out of order. Why? You can take a little piece and say it's not working and fix it, but in the entire context of the presentation, it's going to sound perfect. And it isn't. So if you break it apart in pieces, you're going to have a much better time. It's easier, you can fix things, and you'll know it. And then if you get interrupted, because you know each individual piece, nothing's going to happen to you. So I'm going to recap. Speaking out in the community will open all kinds of doors for you, whether it's within your company or in the community. Make sure that your content really rocks. It's really important that you share your expertise in a meaningful way, because you are the expert and you're who we want to hear. We want to make sure that you open in a really strong way. Today I just shared with you 2 of the ways. One is to have a really good story. Another is to think through a promise that you're going to be delivering by the end of your presentation, that everybody will have heard everything you're sharing. And practice aloud and out of order. I also encourage you to enroll in our online speaking studio that starts October 1st, or call for other kinds of support. I'm here to help you. Now, again, we are having a special 2-for-1 only until September 23rd. All of the bonuses that I mentioned, you get the private consultation, the workbook, the 2 reports, only for $695, and that's in effect until September 23rd. It's our early registration, and you can register on our website at speakoutinc.com, workshops and events. So I look forward to your participating with us, and I believe now we're going to be handling whatever questions we may have that have come in. Please raise your hand. There's a little tool device that George shared with you that's on your screen, and I'll be happy to answer your questions live. We're going to try this. We haven't done that before, and I'm looking forward to talking with each of you, and I'll stay on the line to answer any questions you may have. Thank you. George, we have questions?
Yes, Anne. The first question we have is someone says, I get extremely nervous in front of audiences. What recommendations do you have?
Well, first of all, being nervous is perfectly normal. I still get nervous. I tell people that I used to divorce my husband every time I had a new presentation to do. I would be so anxious practicing. But one of the best recommendations is, as I've shared with you, is to break your presentation into pieces and practice it out of order. Just take a 1-minute segment, take a 2-minute segment, and get to know your content. Some people think they can just get up and start talking and everything's going to be fine, and for most of us that's really not the case. I also encourage you to write out your presentation completely and then back it into bullet points. If you have an entire presentation to read, most people are really miserable. And I can tell you from the audience point of view, it's pretty miserable to sit there, isn't it, and watch somebody read a presentation.
Okay, we have another question here. I've recently started recording myself giving my presentations and don't like what I see. Any recommendations on how to improve?
Okay. First of all, we are our own worst critics, are we not? And so it's probably a good idea to get somebody else, if you can, to play that recording back, because you may not be as awful as you think you are. Remember, most of us don't like our own voice, and we don't like what we see in the mirror. But the other thing to remember with respect is it's not all about you. It's about how do you connect to that audience. Are you bringing information of value? Are you really sharing what people need to hear and what they want to hear? And when you have that confidence that you really put together something of value, your own nervousness will start to disappear.
Okay, you know, the person that asked the first question about being nervous says, I get even sick to my stomach. It's that bad. Help. It's funny though.
Oh, I'm so sorry that's happening to you. And if any of you have questions, please raise your hand because we can answer the questions live. I get it if you don't want us to know who that is. All right, sick to your stomach is not acceptable. I don't want anybody to be sick to their stomach, but you are not alone. There are many famous actresses, I believe Helen Hayes, Barbara Streisand, lots of famous people throw up before they go on stage. This is not a recommended strategy, but just to know you're not alone with it. One of the simple things to do is make sure that you do eat something ahead of time, that you do not have too much caffeine because that just accelerates the whole process. And I remember I had shared some pre-speaking strategies. So if you can afford it, if you can afford the time or the money, get yourself a massage ahead of time. Have your outfit picked out. Try to minimize the stress as much as possible. That will help you.
Okay, we have another question. Is will your course be recorded because I'm not sure evenings work for me? And it says family.
Okay, that's a good question. Yes, each session is going to be recorded. So if you have to miss a session, we'll both the live portion of it and the questions that may be asked recorded for you so you can watch it at any time. And we will be recording, we're planning to record both the video and the slides for the course. It is going to be 8 consecutive Mondays, and I will be able to set up a private consultation with you at some point during the course, or you can wait till the course is over as well. And people can email me questions in between the sessions if a question comes up along the way.
Okay. One question is, do you do one-on-one coaching remotely? Does that work?
That's a good question. It's something I've started in the last couple of years working with people remotely. I'm working now with a woman in Montreal, and I have worked with people in Mexico and in Germany and across the States. Ideally, we meet first face-to-face because then I get to know your personality and what you're really working on, and then we can move into the remote part of the coaching and the training. But I am this client that's in Canada I haven't met, and we're working together. So it does work. It's a little different. It's just like video versus live. But when we're focusing on the presentation, it can work well for you. Thank you.
Okay, we do have a live question, Mary Renee. I'm going to open up your line. Try to make sure that your volume on your machine isn't too loud so we don't get any feedback. I just opened your line.
Hi, Mary Renee.
Hi, how are you doing?
Fine, thank you. How are you tonight?
I'm doing pretty well.
Good. How can I help you?
Well, I really liked the points on the strong openings, and actually, and for our small business, we have our first radio interview on Friday.
Oh, good for you. Congratulations.
Thank you. It's really exciting, but my question was, do you have any recommendations for strong closings? The openings were really helpful, and aside from just saying, well, everyone, you know, that's it, do you have any recommendations for a good way to close?
Yes. Well, first of all, I always recommend a summary, a quick recap of what you covered, because not everybody remembers it. And the other is, ideally, you have some kind of call for action at the end, something you want people to do or you want to encourage them to do. So, for example, what would you encourage people to do at the end of your radio interview? What would you, if they, remember, you may not have as much control in that radio interview either because you're being interviewed.
True.
The other thing, remember, by the way, in radio interview is if they ask you a question you really don't want to answer, you can move the conversation your way.
Got it. Well, I mean, I guess a call for action for us as a, you know, a retail business would be to, I guess, encourage people to check out the website, to watch the videos on the product, and, you know, so make sure that they understand how it works.
I would be even more colorful in that. All right. Make sure you look, especially for our video showing, and then describe whatever the product is.
Oh, okay.
Because that was a little vague. Like, I have no, like, just try it again and encourage me to go watch a video to see something. Tell me what I actually would see on your site, please.
Okay. Well, if you wanted to see, it's a golf accessory, so if you wanted to see the caddy clips in action, you'd go to our website and check out the video that would show you, it shows a scenario of a person having a tough time with the golf game and then how their game improves with using our product.
That's great, but I would repeat the name of the product. You see what I'm saying? Make it, because I want to remember the name of it, because after the show I might not remember. So don't be afraid to repeat the name of the product. And also, if you, it would be showing someone having a tough time, like they couldn't, give me even a little bit more, not a lot more, because you won't have a lot of seconds, but kind of simulate the video. So I want to go see it myself.
Oh, okay. Well, the person they're very frustrated with forgetting their clubs, leaving them behind, and feeling rushed by others. You know, so if you go ahead and watch the video, it will show you how caddy clips can help you avoid these problems.
Much better. You see how much clearer that was?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you want to, they're inviting you on the show because you have a new product that people want to hear about, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you have a golfing community that has, just like we were talking about, attention span and no time, and here you are ready to help them. So I think the more you can make it visual and practical, the better. That would be great. You did a great job with that. Can I help you with something else?
I mean, I think that's really it. Everything with the strong openings really helps. And well, I mean, I guess you're doing it now. You're speaking to an audience that you can't see. So do you have any pointers for that? Because we would just, there will be two of us speaking with, I guess, the DJ or the person that's doing the segment.
I'm evolving into this, as I shared with you, because I'm used to live audiences too. I call it talking to nobody, this little hole. And part of it is practice. And practice just looking at that little hole. But the other thing is have your stories ready. And just imagine that you're telling your best friend the stories, because it does make it easier. And also just know that you'll get better doing it. I think I'm much better than the first one I did. And I feel more comfortable doing it.
Got it.
It just does take time to get better. But do have your opening, just as if it were any other speech. Break it into little pieces. And get them ready.
Okay, and I suppose it's good to have too much information as opposed to not enough, like kind of overdo your notes to make sure you wouldn't miss answering a question if they had one, as opposed to having just a couple things written down and kind of being at a loss for words.
I totally agree. It's okay to have notes. And some people say, oh, I don't have any notes. And I said, yeah, you. I use now, because I've been doing this so long, my PowerPoints are my notes. But I still have things written down to remind me to do things. And the more you do it, the notes are always good. Even with my clients as speakers, I say go up there with notes. You don't want to read anything, really. But it's a good idea to have those as notes, especially the first few times you're doing something.
Yeah,
you know your products inside out, yes?
Well, yes, and that's what I was thinking, but, I tend to be a little nervous in speaking, so I think that notes would help me refocus, even though I'm not reading them, just to look down and kind of make a check mark, like, okay, I covered that, so let me not be too repetitive, and, I think it's kind of just like a little guideline.
It's excellent to have that. It really, you will feel more prepared with that. And the other thing is maybe you want to have pictures of your products in front of you.
Oh, sure.
As a suggestion.
Okay, and actually bring one in case they have a question that we might kind of have a brain freeze?
Yes.
Got it.
So you could actually pick up a club or pick up the Caddy product and just hold it. And you could say, I'm having one in my hands and it does this and this and this. Use, even though radio is an audio medium, we still need to visualize what you're talking about.
Well, that's true. I'm sure that'll help too.
And if you have it with you, it might be easier to do that. Well, I wish you lots of success. Will you write me a little email when you're done and tell me how it went, please?
Oh, yes, ma'am, I sure will. I wrote down your email address at the beginning of the PowerPoint.
Oh, thank you, because I'd love to hear how it went, and I wish you all the best. Okay,
sure,
thank you for calling.
All right, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, we have another question for you via chat, and it's how do you engage the audience if you see some of them looking at their cell phones and distracted with other things on the table or side conversations?
It's very discouraging to see that, and I empathize and plead to being guilty sometimes myself doing that. A couple of things. Partly, you don't really know if they're not tweeting about you, because that's happening. If you're engaging, sometimes they're on there, and some speakers deliberately do that these days. I've seen it more and more, so that if they're on their phone, part of what they're doing is actually writing about, oh, I'm at this cool place, and describing it. The other part of it is the reality is that they may not really be listening to you. You really may have lost them, and that's really frustrating. So one of the things you can try, one of the strategies, remember I had the polling that I wove into the presentation this time. I didn't have it the first time. And this time I did it as a way to kind of keep you as the audience engaged. So one of the strategies I'm going to recommend is if this has happened to you and you don't want it to happen again, I don't want it to happen to you, where can you build in audience participation in your presentation so that they're going to stop looking at their cell phone, stop looking at their computer, and really pay attention to you? And more we need to build that kind of engagement into the presentation if you're going to keep them. Otherwise, the phone is going to lure them, the computer is going to lure them. Every time they email, they hear something, and it is discouraging. You put all that work in and they're not paying attention, but it's universal. On the other hand, I have been to meetings lately where the audience was so engaged that nobody looked at their phone. It can happen, but it has to be the right presentation, and you can do it. You definitely can do it. Good question.
Okay, we have plenty of time. We still have about another 7-8 minutes. And I've got one question here. It says, I'm higher up in our org but speak below par compared to my peers. How would your course be able to help me address this?
The course is really designed to give you the basics of good speaking. And in each class, you're going to be using the workbook that I've given you, which will help you prepare any kind of presentation. But each class builds on the next, although they're separate. You don't have to come to all of them. You can listen to them on the recording. But my recommendation for anyone taking the class is to be thinking about a specific presentation. And everyone, no matter what the level of that they're in an organization, if you're in a company, you have to make a presentation. It could be to the board, it could be to your department, it could be to clients. And the principles of making a presentation are really the same regardless. The other thing we're going to look at is impromptu as well as planned. Most people fret about the planned presentation. You've got a week, you've got 2 weeks to prepare. But the truth is we do more impromptu presentations than planned ones, right? We're asked our opinion on a proposal, on a recommendation, on a project. Boom, we're giving a presentation. So the course is designed to help with both of those things, both with planned and impromptu presentations. Hope that helped.
That's all the questions we have, Ann.
Okay. Well, I want to thank everybody. Thank you, George, for your help tonight. Thank you all for joining us. Please remember that I would love for you to participate in the online speaking studio that starts October 1st. Please remember that you are the experts, and we're looking forward to hearing your wonderful information, to hearing your experiences, and to learning from you. If you found tonight useful, please drop me an email, or as I asked earlier, please like us on Facebook. And please feel free to call me with any questions you may have. We'll be doing these free webinars periodically, and I appreciate your sharing the information with your friends. We are doing one at noon tomorrow. If you know anyone else who might register, who might benefit from coming, I ask them to register online. And thank you on behalf of George Diaz and myself. Thanks for joining us tonight.